Kyle Marcus Clifford was sentenced to a whole life term for the murders of Carol Hunt, 61, and her daughters Louise Hunt, 25, and Hannah Hunt, 28, at their home in Bushey, Hertfordshire, on the 9th of July 2024. Clifford, Louise's ex-boyfriend, carried out the killings following the breakdown of their relationship on 26 June 2024. In the days leading up to the murders, Clifford purchased a crossbow, 6 bolts, a butcher knife, a CO2 Glock air pistol, petrol, duct tape, and rope. He planned his attack meticulously, surveilling the property and researching the household's routines. Clifford arrived at the Hunt home at 2:32 p.m. carrying a knife in a rucksack. He stabbed Carol Hunt at the door after claiming he was returning some of Louise's belongings. He then retrieved a crossbow from his car, waited for Louise to enter the house, and restrained and gaped her over several hours. He later used Louise's phone to check when her father would return and researched smoke detectors, allegedly planning to burn the house down. Clifford shot Louise with the crossbow at 6:49 p.m. and then shot Hannah shortly afterward at 6:54 p.m. Both women died from their injuries. Carol Hunt had already succumbed to her stab wounds, and Hannah was found still alive when emergency services arrived, but was pronounced dead at the scene. After fleeing, Clifford attempted to take his own life in Lavender Hill Cemetery near his home in the London borough of Enfield by shooting himself in the chest with the crossbow, which left him paralysed from the waist down. He was treated at the Royal London Hospital before being remanded in custody. Clifford was previously a soldier in the Queen's Dragoon Guards and a former security guard. His brother, Bradley Clifford, is also a convicted murderer. Clifford was arrested on the 11th of July 2024 and charged with 3 counts of murder, false imprisonment, possession of an offensive weapon, and gape. Initially pleading not guilty, he later pleaded guilty to the murders, false imprisonment, and possession of an offensive weapon on the 22nd of January 2025, and was found guilty of the gape charge. On 11th March 2025, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Judge Joel Benathan described Clifford as a jealous man, soaked in self-pity, a man who holds women in utter contempt, and noted the letters he had written to his family prior to the attacks were dripping with self-pity. In May 2004, Jeshma Raithatha, a 17-year-old A-level student, was walking home near her West London residence when she was brutally attacked by Viktor Dembovskis, a 43-year-old Latvian man with a history of sexual violence. Dembovskis gaped Jeshma twice before stabbing her through the heart and leaving her body concealed in undergrowth, where it was discovered 8 days later. After the murder, he fled to his hometown of Livani, Latvia, but left behind key evidence at the scene, including his keys and Jeshma's blood-stained jewelry, which allowed police to track him down. Authorities revealed that Dembovskis had previously served 2 prison sentences in Latvia for violent sexual assaults. In 1990, he attacked a kindergarten teacher at knife point, and in 1997, he committed another gape. Despite this criminal record, he had been allowed into the UK, a point Jeshma's parents later raised publicly. Following his extradition, Dembovskis was tried at the Old Bailey, where the jury unanimously convicted him of murder after only 2 hours of deliberation. Judge Peter Beaumont sentenced Dembovskis to 3 life terms, recommending that he should never be released. During sentencing, the judge emphasized his complete lack of remorse and the devastating impact of his actions on Jeshma's family. In a statement outside court, her parents, Suresh and Manjula Raithatha, expressed their shock that a convicted sex offender had been admitted into Britain, stating that while justice had been served, the loss of their daughter was irreparable. Philip Hegarty, born in 1956, was convicted in 2004 for the brutal murder of his close friend Derek Bennett, 41, in Cardiff in 2003. After attacking Bennett with a hammer-like object, Hegarty wrapped the body in a rug, placed it in a stolen Renault Laguna, and set it on fire in a car park. The assault was so savage that Bennett's body could only be identified through dental records. In addition to the murder, Hegarty stole approximately £3,000 from his victim, who had been carrying both cash and illicit drugs at the time. During the investigation, forensic evidence tied Hegarty directly to the crime. Blood from Bennett was found in Hegarty's flat and on his clothing, and fingerprints were located on the blood-stained wall in the cellar. CCTV footage also placed Hegarty with Bennett on the night of the attack. Prosecutors detailed Hegarty's prior history of violent behavior, including attempted murder and robberies targeting elderly individuals. Despite Hegarty's claim that Bennett was like the brother I never had, and that the murder was impossible, the jury found him guilty. At Swansea Crown Court, Mr. Justice Roderick Evans described Hegarty as a dangerous man and imposed a life sentence with a whole life order, meaning Hegarty would never be released. The judge emphasized the brutality of the crime, noting that Bennett's skull was shattered into 23 pieces and it took over an hour for him to die, stating the motive was robbery. Following the sentence, Bennett's brother expressed relief that justice had been served. Hegarty's solicitor announced plans to appeal the conviction, arguing that Hegarty was shocked by the verdict. Jeremy Neville Bamber, born Jeremy Paul Marsham on the 13th of January 1961, is a British convicted mass murderer. He was found guilty of the 1985 White House farm killings in Tollishunt, Darcy, Essex, in which 5 members of his adoptive family were shot and killed. His adoptive parents, Neville and June Bamber, his adoptive sister, Sheila Caffell, and Sheila's 6-year-old twin sons. The prosecution argued that Bamber carried out the murders to secure a substantial inheritance and attempted to frame his sister, who suffered from schizophrenia. The jury returned a guilty verdict, and Bamber is serving a life sentence with a whole life tariff, leaving him ineligible for parole. Jeremy Bamber was born to Juliet Wheeler and Leslie Bryan Marsham in 1961, but was placed for adoption by the Church of England Children's Society at 6 months old. He was adopted by Neville and June Bamber, wealthy farmers living at White House Farm in Essex. The couple had previously adopted a daughter, Sheila, 4 years earlier. Bamber attended St Nicholas Primary and Malden Court Prep School, before moving to the boarding school Gresham's in Norfolk. Although he initially left school without qualifications, he later earned 7 O-levels at a sixth form college in Colchester. He was known for his charm and reportedly had relationships with both men and women. After leaving school, Bamber travelled to Australia and New Zealand, where he reportedly became involved in petty crime and claimed to have smuggled heroin. Upon returning to the UK, he worked in restaurants and bars before joining the family farm business. Bamber also owned a share in the family's caravan site, Osea Road Camp Sites Limited, and lived rent-free in a cottage near White House Farm. Weeks before the murders, he admitted to breaking into and stealing from the caravan site, a fact revealed after his girlfriend came forward as a witness. On 7th August 1985, Bamber reported the shootings to the police, claiming his sister Sheila had gone berserk with his father's rifle. When officers arrived, they discovered Sheila dead in the bedroom with the rifle against her throat, her parents dead nearby, and her twin sons in another room. The family had been shot 25 times, mostly at close range. The prosecution contested Bamber's account, arguing that Neville Bamber could not have telephoned his son due to his injuries. The rifle silencer was already in place, and Sheila lacked the strength to overpower her father and handle the gun. The evidence suggested that Sheila could not have committed the killings herself. Despite repeated challenges, Bamber's defense has been unable to overturn the conviction. Bamber is held at HM Prison Wakefield, where he is engaged in educational and charitable activities, including helping fellow inmates with reading and writing and transcribing books into Braille. Over the years, he has faced attacks from other prisoners, including a knife assault. He has also maintained a network of supporters outside prison and corresponded with women while incarcerated. Bamber has repeatedly sought to overturn his conviction or challenge his whole life tariff. Appeals to the Court of Appeal in 2002 and further applications to the Criminal Cases Review Commission in 2004 and 2012 were unsuccessful. In March 2021, a new application was lodged with the CCRC, supported by previously withheld documents, raising multiple grounds of appeal. As of 2025, he has spent 39 years in prison. Bamber has also attempted to recover a share of the family estate and profits from the caravan site, but courts have consistently ruled that his conviction prevents him from inheriting. Lawrence Bierton, born 30 December 1959, is an English convicted serial killer. In 1996, he was sentenced to life imprisonment for the double murder of two elderly sisters in Rotherham, and in 2023, he received a whole life sentence for a third murder committed while he was on license. Bierton's first known crime occurred on 25 June 1995, when 79-year-old Aileen Doodle and her 72-year-old sister, Elsie Gregory, caught him and his accomplice Michael Pluck stealing from their home. In response, Bierton and Pluck bludgeoned and suffocated the sisters to death, then piled the living room furniture over their bodies and set it on fire. Both men were sentenced to life imprisonment at Sheffield Crown Court in 1996. Michael Pluck died in HMP Rye Hill on the 13th of February 2012 after failed appeals in 2002 and 2010. Bierton was released on license in 2017, recalled to prison in 2018, and released again in 2020. On 9th November 2021, while living in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, he murdered his 73-year-old neighbour, Pauline Quinn, by beating her to death with her own coffee table, causing traumatic head injuries. His substance abuse was cited as a contributing factor to the killing. Following the case, the Probation Service conducted a review, released in January 2023, acknowledging failings in Bierton's supervision. Brendan Clark Smith, the local MP for Bassetlaw, called for a public inquiry. On the 20th of December 2023, Bierton was given a whole life sentence, ensuring he will never be released from prison. The Probation Service issued an apology to the victims' families for its failings. Jeremy Thorpe Wing, aged 61 at the time of sentencing, was convicted of sexually abusing two children, who were 7 years old when the abuse began. He also faced allegations involving a third child. During a police raid on his home, authorities found toys, motorized go-karts, water pistols, video games, and recordings showing Wing and another man, Brian Hogg, abusing children. Both Wing and Hogg, who had met while serving prison sentences for prior sexual offences, were found guilty of 2 counts of gape so severe that the victims would suffer lifelong physical injuries. Judge Andrew Patience determined that neither man would ever be safe to release, sentencing them to life imprisonment with a whole life order at Maidstone Crown Court, a sentence rarely given for crimes other than murder. Hogg's life sentence was later overturned. Stephen John Port, known as the Grinder Killer, is a British serial killer and serial gapist who was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order in 2016 for the murders of 4 young men and multiple sexual assaults. Born in Southend-on-Sea in 1975 and raised in Dagenham, Port was described as a quiet, isolated figure with a childlike personality who often exhibited strange behaviour even as an adult. He lived alone in Barking, London, where he worked as a chef and used online dating and hookup apps to lure his victims. Posing under false identities, Port drugged young men with lethal doses of GHB, a date gape drug, before gaping and, in 4 cases, killing them. His victims included Anthony Walgate, Gabriel Cavari, Daniel Whitworth, and Jack Taylor, whose bodies were found either outside Port's flat or in a nearby churchyard between 2014 and 2015. He attempted to cover up his crimes with staged scenarios, including planting a fake, taking his own life note on one victim. Port's conviction came after a series of damning revelations about the Metropolitan Police's handling of the deaths. Despite the striking similarities between the cases and repeated warnings from the victims' families and members of the LGBT community, officers initially failed to link the deaths and dismissed them as non-suspicious overdoses. This catalogue of investigative failures led to widespread criticism, multiple inquiries, and compensation awarded to the victims' families. In total, Port was found guilty of 4 murders, several gapes, sexual assaults, and drugging offences against at least 11 known victims. His case not only exposed him as one of Britain's most notorious modern serial killers, but also highlighted systemic failings in how the police handled crimes involving gay men and date-gape drugs. Peter Howard Moore, born on 19 September 1946, was a British serial killer who worked as a cinema manager in North Wales at locations including Bugilt, Holyhead, Kinmel Bay, and Denbigh. Between September and December 1995, Moore murdered 4 men, committing the attacks for fun. Due to his habit of wearing a black shirt and tie, he became known as the Man in Black. In addition to the murders, he carried out 39 sexual assaults on men over a 20-year period across North Wales and the Merseyside area. During his trial, Moore claimed that a fictional lover he called Jason, after the horror movie character from Friday the 13th, was responsible for the murders. The jury rejected this defense and found him guilty on all counts. In November 1996, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that he should never be released. While in Wakefield Prison, Moore became acquainted with fellow serial killer Harold Shipman. In June 2008, the High Court confirmed that Moore would spend the remainder of his life in prison. He later challenged his sentence in the European Court of Human Rights, arguing that whole life orders violated human rights. His appeal was initially rejected in 2012, although a 2013 ECHR ruling clarified that prisoners must have the possibility of review or release to meet human rights standards. Subsequent legal challenges have upheld the validity of whole life sentences under certain circumstances. Moore remains imprisoned, and rumors of his death in 2011 were false. Robert John Maudsley, born on 26 June 1953, is an English serial killer known for the murder of 4 people, including 1 killing in a psychiatric hospital and 2 more committed while already serving a life sentence in prison. He became infamous in the media as Hannibal the Cannibal, though reports that he ate part of a victim's brain were later proven false. Maudsley remains Britain's longest-serving prisoner in solitary confinement. Maudsley was the 4th of 12 children, born in Speke, Liverpool. As a young child, he and 3 of his older siblings were placed in a Catholic orphanage in Crosby. At age 8, his parents took him and his siblings back, but Maudsley endured ongoing physical abuse from his father. He later reported being sexually abused by his father, experiences that left deep psychological scars. As a teenager, Maudsley attempted to take his own life several times and sought psychiatric help, reporting that he heard voices urging him to kill his parents. Reflecting later on his early years, he said that if he had acted against his parents in 1970, none of these people would have died, referring to his later victims. In 1974, Maudsley killed John Farrell in Wood Green, London. Farrell had offered Maudsley a sexual encounter and showed him photographs of children he had abused. Maudsley voluntarily surrendered to the police, requesting psychiatric treatment. He was deemed unfit to stand trial and committed to Broadmoor Hospital. 3 years later, in 1977, Maudsley and fellow patient David Cheeseman tortured and killed David Francis, another Broadmoor inmate convicted of child molestation. The attack, lasting approximately 9 hours, was reportedly motivated by revenge for an alleged assault on a friend. Both men had prepared for the killing by rearranging furniture to barricade the room. Maudsley was convicted of manslaughter and transferred to Wakefield Prison, though he expressed a desire to return to Broadmoor. In July 1978, Maudsley killed 2 more inmates at Wakefield in a single day. His first victim, Salney Darwood, was serving time for sexual assault and the murder of his wife. Maudsley invited him into his cell, garroted and stabbed him, then hid the body. Later, he sought another target and murdered William Roberts, who was imprisoned for attempting to strangle a young girl. Maudsley stabbed Roberts and bludgeoned him against a wall. Afterward, he calmly informed prison staff that the next roll call would be too short. Maudsley has stated that he targets only sex offenders, describing himself as a threat exclusively to those convicted of sexual crimes. Mark Richard Hobson was a British spree killer responsible for the deaths of 4 people in North Yorkshire in 2004. Growing up in a seemingly stable family, Hobson lived with his parents and 2 sisters before moving to Selby later in childhood. He married his childhood sweetheart in 1993, and they had a daughter. But by 1999, Hobson abruptly left his family, turning to heavy drinking and drug use. He later worked as a club doorman, landscape gardener, and at a power station, though his life increasingly spiraled out of control. Hobson's killing spree began on the 10th of July 2004 when he murdered his girlfriend Claire Sanderson in their shared flat in Campbellsforth. He beat her 17 times with a hammer, strangled her, and wrapped her body in bin bags. A week later, he lured Claire's twin sister Diane to the flat under the pretense of visiting her sister, then tortured and murdered her, biting off her nipple and sexually assaulting her before strangling her to death. The following day, Hobson killed an elderly couple, James and Joan Britton, in their home in York. Hobson had meticulously planned the murders, keeping notes detailing his intentions, including supplies and a list of potential victims. Hobson was apprehended on the 25th of July 2004 at a petrol station near York after an 8-day nationwide manhunt. During his arrest, he reportedly exclaimed, "I'm a fucking killer, aren't I?" At Leeds Crown Court in April 2005, he pled guilty to all 4 murders. Psychiatric evaluations confirmed he was sane at the time of the crimes. Judge Mr. Justice Gregson described the killings as beyond words in their severity and sentenced Hobson to life imprisonment with a recommendation that he never be released. Despite Hobson's appeal to reduce his sentence due to his guilty plea, the Court of Appeal upheld the original ruling, citing the horrific nature of the crimes. While in prison, Hobson was involved in violent incidents, including scalding fellow inmate Ian Huntley with boiling water. Arthur Simpson-Kent, the partner of former EastEnders actress Sian Blake, was sentenced to a whole life tariff for the brutal murders of Blake and their 2 young sons, Zachary, 8, and Eamon, 4. In December, after learning that Blake intended to leave him and take the children, Simpson-Kent attacked them in their home in Erith, southeast London. The court heard that Blake, who had motor neurone disease, would have been unable to defend herself. All 3 victims were struck on the head and then stabbed in the neck or throat with a small axe. Simpson-Kent then buried their bodies in the garden and attempted to cover up the crime by painting over the bloodstains before fleeing to Ghana the following month. He was arrested at Heathrow Airport after being extradited and admitted to the murders. Mr. Justice Singh described the killings as involving a significant degree of premeditation and planning, particularly with regard to the 2 boys, and highlighted the serious aggravating factors, including the vulnerability of the victims due to age and disability. Simpson-Kent attempted to explain his actions as a moment when something just snapped, claiming a mental blank and a focus on acting rather than thinking, but the judge rejected his claims of depression of intent as mitigating factors. The case shocked the public, particularly because of Blake's previous career as an actress and the extreme violence inflicted on her and her children. The court concluded that Simpson-Kent's crimes were so grave that he must never be released, ensuring he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Anthony Arkwright is a British spree killer who, over a period of 56 hours in August 1988, murdered 3 people in Wath-upon-Dearn, South Yorkshire. He is also suspected of a 4th killing, although that charge was left on file by the trial judge. At just 21 years old at the time of the murders, Arkwright became the youngest individual in the UK to receive a whole life tariff. Arkwright was born into a mining community in Wath-upon-Dearn. He was one of 5 siblings, abandoned by his mother at an early age, while his father worked as a miner. Spending much of his childhood in care homes, he struggled academically and drifted into crime, including time in a borstal. By 21, he was employed by a scrap metal business in Mexborough, South Yorkshire, but was dismissed on 26 August 1988 due to poor attendance. His killing spree began shortly after this dismissal. Arkwright's first victim was his 68-year-old grandfather, Stanislav Pudoikas. Arkwright stabbed him at his allotment, leaving him paralyzed, before crushing his skull with a heavy hammer. He then killed his grandfather's 73-year-old housekeeper, Elsa Cronodite, while stealing £3,000 in savings. The bodies of both victims went undiscovered for 6 days. Arkwright's third victim was his neighbour, Raymond Ford, an unemployed former teacher who had previously reported Arkwright for theft. On the 28th of August, Arkwright entered Ford's flat wearing only a devil mask and brutally stabbed him, leaving him to die among the chaos of his own home. Remarkably, Arkwright was questioned and released by police on unrelated charges before Ford's death was discovered. On 29th August, Arkwright attacked another neighbor, Marcus Law, a 25-year-old in a wheelchair. He stabbed Law repeatedly, attempted to gut him, gouged out his eyes, and desecrated his body with cigarettes. Law's mother discovered his body, prompting Arkwright's arrest. He confessed to 4 murders, although one remained unproven in court. While awaiting trial at HMP Hull, Arkwright attempted to be declared insane, smearing his cell walls with feces to demonstrate delusions of grandeur. After assessment at Rampton Hospital, psychiatrists deemed him sane and fit to plead. At Sheffield Crown Court in July 1989, Arkwright pleaded guilty to 3 murders and received a life sentence. The prosecution described him as an evil fantasist, with aspirations for notoriety akin to Jack the Ripper. The 4th suspected murder was left unresolved, with the judge ordering the case to lie on file. In 2003, legislative changes allowed certain life sentences to carry no possibility of parole. Arkwright was among those affected, receiving a whole life tariff. Challenges were later raised at the European Court of Human Rights, arguing that whole life sentences without review were inhumane. However, the Court of Appeal upheld the legality of such sentences, affirming that Arkwright would remain in prison for life. John William Cooper, also known as the Bullseye Killer, is a Welsh serial killer convicted for a series of brutal murders and sexual assaults in Pembrokeshire. Born on 3 September 1944, Cooper had a long history of criminal behavior, beginning in his late teens with theft, assault, and disorderly conduct. Over the years, his criminality escalated to armed robbery, burglary, and ultimately multiple murders. Cooper gained notoriety for the 1985 double murder of siblings Richard and Helen Thomas at Scoveston Park, when he tied them up and shot them before burning down their farmhouse. 4 years later, in 1989, he killed another couple, Peter and Gwenda Dixon, during a holiday in Pembrokeshire. Armed with a sawn-off shotgun, he forced the couple to reveal their bank details, robbed them, and then shot them in the face at point-blank range. In 1996, he sexually assaulted and gaped 2 teenage girls while holding a group of 5 teenagers at gunpoint in a wooded area in his hometown of Milford Haven. Cooper was also involved in around 30 burglaries and violent robberies over his criminal career. For decades, Cooper eluded justice for the murders. He was convicted of robbery and burglary in 1998 and released from prison in 2009. Following advances in DNA and forensic science, a cold case review in 2009 connected him to the murders, and evidence, including his shotgun and DNA traces, analyzed by forensic scientist Angela Gallup, led to his arrest. On the 26th of May 2011, Cooper was convicted at the Crown Court and sentenced to 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Due to the extreme brutality of his crimes, he was also given a whole life order, meaning he will never be released. The presiding judge, John Griffith Williams, emphasized that the murders were of such evil wickedness that life imprisonment truly meant life.